And Second Baptist, no matter how big we get, no matter how many ministries we have, there are some key, crucial elements of the church that we must always keep in mind. We must always evangelize. We must always preach and teach the word. We must always pray. We must always help those in need and stand for justice. Those things we don't normally forget, but there are some things that Peter speaks about in this text that he knows the church sometimes easily forgets, but they are the little things that when done right make all the difference. As the Apostle Peter concludes this letter, he has spoken about many things, but we all know final words are always words that the writer just doesn't want you to forget. They say it at the end, say, I said all of this, but I don't want you to forget that. These last things, these final words, they're the things that we want to read. We can't reiterate enough. These are the things that need to be kept in mind because they are easily forgotten. In verse 8, he says, above all. Some translations say, most importantly, keep this in mind. Don't forget this. This is important. This is crucial. Above all, Peter has taught about holiness in this book, salvation in this book, our suffering for Christ in this book. But he concludes with these words. Peter has grown to know that our holiness and our salvation must produce some things. We can't call ourselves a church, call ourselves born-again believers, call ourselves spirit-filled people of God if we forget some basic things. Churches can have big buildings, fancy ministries, be popular, but if we don't keep these things in mind, we can become just like any other organization. Peter has matured, and the church has matured at this point where Peter, as a leader in the church, now wants to give some great coaching from the sidelines. Peter wants to close this letter out with some coaching on the fundamentals of the faith that must be kept in mind no matter what we do. The first thing Peter says, check this out, is that we must keep in mind is that we must love each other deeply. You ought to write that down. We, that's all of us, must love each other deeply. Now, beloved, this is that agape, that tough, that hard, unconditional, self-sacrificing, selfless, burden-bearing, patient, long-suffering type of love. This is that 1 Corinthians 13 love. This is that love that lays down its life for another. This is that love that forgives. This is that love that our flesh hates. And Peter says we must do this type of love deeply. This means with all of our heart. We must serve with this kind of love in mind. It doesn't matter if your usher uniform is impeccable, if your love isn't on point, you are serving and standing in vain. This is the kind of love that goes the extra mile. This is the kind of love that God wants us to have towards one another. The church is often and too often a place of superficial relationships. But Peter says that we are to do this. What we are to do is not superficial, but with real love. Oh, beloved, I worry about Second Baptist that we are getting too superficial, that we don't know each other well enough, that we don't care enough for one another. Oh, beloved, if there's anything we must do right, it is love one another. I know that's what God is going to grade us on, and I want us to be pleasing to God. I want God to see second and smile. I want God to see us and see Christ in us. I want God to see his light of love in us. I want God to see us reflect his mercy, his grace, his care, and his concern in all that we do. We can't forget that we are called, commanded to love each other deeply. Not a superficial love, not a hi, nice to see you kind of love, but a love that cares, a love that prays, a love that's concerned, a love that's unconditional, a tough love. That love means I hold you accountable, but I ain't going to stop loving you. That kind of love says I might have to correct you, but you know I'm going to be there for you when you stand in need. That kind of love that said I'm going to forgive you and we're going to keep on moving. That kind of love. Let's see, stop thinking that the church will be full of people that always get it right. The apostle tells the church to love each other deeply because the church isn't full of perfect people. Folks leave the church all the time because they encounter imperfect church folk. Well, beloved, there aren't any perfect church folk. If you're looking for that, you're going to be looking and looking and looking and looking. Peter says that love covers over a multitude of sin because because you can't be in the church and not realize that there's a whole lot, or all of us are imperfect people. This is true for God's love for us, but this love, this unconditional agape love, must extend from his children to each other. Now, we are not talking about ignoring sin nor holding people accountable. We must still do that, but we must do it in love. We must err on the side of being loving and forgiving. That's why the Apostle Paul says, love covers over a multitude of sin. He squeezes that in this because, you know, sometimes serving the people of God, they're going to get on your nerves. They're going to bother you to the nth degree. They're not going to do what you say. They're not going to sit where you tell them to sit. They're not going to go where they tell. They're not going to always love you. They're not always going to smile at you. They're not always going to speak to you. You need some kind of love that is going to allow you to love them in spite of. People in church will not always get it right. Stop thinking people are perfect. Deacons won't get it right. Preachers won't get it right. Trustees won't get it right. Choir members won't always get it right. Fellow ushers won't always get it right. We've got to love each other enough to give each other some passes every now and then. Just tell the person next to you, I need a pass sometimes. I'm not perfect. I still struggle. Keep talking to her and tell them, pray for me. I see too many grudges in the church. I see too many folks holding on to stuff for years. It's time to forgive, heal, and move on in God. Don't waste time on unforgiveness. Find that release in reconciliation right now, because we got to love one another.